Hey everyone, we're diving deep into data backup strategies today. We got a document comparing two popular approaches, the classic 3-2-1 rule and the newer 3-2-1-1-0. And let me tell you, this stuff is important.
It really is.
Imagine you're finishing up that passion project,
Right.
and all of a sudden, hard drive failure, or even worse, ransomware. It's gone.
Poof.
Not if you've got a solid backup plan, though. That's exactly what we're breaking down today.
Yeah. It's interesting how many people don't think about data loss as a when, not if.
Right.
Everyone is vulnerable from, individuals to huge companies.
So let's talk about mitigating that risk.
Yeah.
This document starts with a 3-2-1 rule. So explain it to me like I'm a friend who just got their first computer.
Okay, so think of it like a safety net with 3 layers. First, you've got 3 copies of your data. You want your original plus 2 backups. Then second, store those copies on 2 different types of media. So for example, 1 copy on an external hard drive, which is great because it's portable and pretty affordable. But they can be damaged or stolen, so for your second copy, you could put it in the cloud, which is very accessible and protects you from local disasters. But then you're relying on the security of your cloud provider.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the third part?
1 copy offsite. If your house burns down or there's a flood, you don't want your backup to be destroyed too.
Right, yeah. Okay, so the 3-2-1 rule is like the basic insurance for our data. But this document is arguing that in today's world, we need more. It proposes this 3-2-1-1-0 rule. What are these extra digits all about?
Well, think about ransomware attacks. They don't just encrypt your files, they often target your backups too. That's where that first extra 1 comes in, an air-gapped copy. This means a copy of your data that's totally offline. It's like a digital time capsule sealed away from the internet and any threats.
Oh, so even if hackers get into your system, they can't touch that copy.
Exactly. It reduces your vulnerability to cyberattacks a lot. You can use a service that offers immutable backups. Your data is locked and can't be modified and deleted, even by the provider, for a set period.
Okay, that makes sense. What about that final 0?
That stands for zero backup failures. It highlights how a backup is only as good as its ability to restore your data. You need to test your backups regularly. Imagine needing to restore from a backup only to find it was corrupted or the system failed.
Right, that's a nightmare.
Total nightmare scenario.
So how often should you test backups then?
It depends on how often your data changes and your risk tolerance. For critical data, weekly or even daily tests might be a good idea. Less critical data, maybe monthly is sufficient.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've got these 2 rules down. But why the evolution? Why is the 3-2-1-1-0 rule becoming the new standard?
It all comes down to the evolving threat landscape. Cybersecurity threats are way more sophisticated than ever, and our increasing reliance on cloud storage introduces new vulnerabilities. The 3-2-1-1-0 rule is a direct response to these challenges. It's about building a more robust and resilient backup strategy.
Let's dive into those challenges a bit more. I bet this is where it gets really interesting.
You bet it does. Let's start with cybersecurity threats. We're seeing a massive surge in ransomware attacks.
Ransomware, that's where they encrypt your files and hold them hostage until you pay a ransom, right?
That's exactly right. And it's not just individuals being targeted. We've seen major corporations, hospitals, even government agencies hit by these attacks. They can cripple operations and cost millions in damages.
That's terrifying. So how does the 3-2-1-1-0 rule help with that?
Remember that air-gapped copy we talked about? That's your insurance policy against ransomware. Because it's offline, hackers can't encrypt it or delete it. It's your clean copy, ready to restore.
So it's like a secret escape route, hidden from the bad guys. I like it.
Precisely. Now let's talk about cloud storage. It's so convenient.
Yeah.
You can access your files from anywhere. It's generally affordable. Takes the hassle out of managing physical storage devices.
Oh yeah, I pretty much live in the cloud these days. But you're suggesting there are downsides.
Well, cloud storage is generally pretty safe and reliable, but it's not without risks. What if your cloud provider has an outage or a security breach? All your data could be inaccessible or even worse, compromised.
Okay, yeah, I see your point. So putting all your eggs in the cloud basket might not be the best idea. How does the 3-2-1-1-0 rule address that?
By emphasizing diversification, you want to spread your risk across different media and storage locations. So use cloud storage, but also have a local backup. And keep an offsite copy, maybe an external hard drive at a friend's house or in a safe deposit box.
So it's all about having a backup plan for your backup plan.
Exactly. We need to be prepared for multiple points of failure, and the 3-2-1-1-0 rule helps us do that.
It sounds like a really smart approach. Layered data protection. We've covered a lot here. But how can our listeners actually put these rules into action?
That's a great question. We'll dive into the specifics in the next part of our deep dive. But before we wrap up this section, I want to emphasize one thing. Don't wait until it's too late.
You mean don't wait until you've already lost data to start thinking about backups.
Exactly. Data loss can happen to anyone at any time. It's not if, but when. So take some time now to implement a solid backup strategy. You'll thank yourself later.
That's excellent advice. A little prevention now can save you from a lot of heartache later. So listeners, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back with part 2, where we'll break down the practical steps for implementing the 3-2-1-1-0 rule and choosing the right backup solutions for your needs. Welcome back, everyone. We just laid out this 3-2-1-1-0 rule, which is like the gold standard for data backup now. But knowing the rules and actually, putting them into practice are two very different things. So let's break down how to actually implement this 3-2-1-1-0 rule and how to choose the right solutions.
Okay, that's good.
What are some of the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to backups?
Well, one of the biggest is thinking that just having a backup is enough. Remember, it's not just about quantity, it's about quality and accessibility too. You need to have the right types of backups, on the right media, in the right places, and tested regularly. A single backup on an external hard drive that you never test is, well, it's asking for trouble.
So a single external hard drive isn't enough.
It's a good start, but not enough on its own. It doesn't address the risk of physical damage or theft or even ransomware attacks. You need to diversify your backups and have that off-site redundancy.
Okay, so that brings us to another potential pitfall, relying only on cloud storage. It's so convenient, but what are the downsides?
Cloud storage has its own vulnerabilities. What if your cloud provider experiences an outage? Or there's a security breach at their end, all of a sudden your data's inaccessible, or worse, it's compromised.
Yeah, and you're also basically handing over your data to a third party.
Exactly. You're trusting them to keep your data safe and secure. You need to really carefully look at the security practices of your cloud provider.
Right, makes sense. So we need to be smart about cloud storage. What's another common mistake?
Assuming that backups are only for like big organizations or really techie people, that's just not true at all. Data loss can happen to anyone. Students, small business owners, artists, even grandparents storing family photos.
Yeah, everyone with valuable data on their computer should have a backup strategy.
Exactly. It's like wearing a seatbelt. You might not need it every day, but when you do, you're really glad you have it.
Okay, so we've talked about some common backup myths. Now let's get into choosing the right solutions. It can be overwhelming. There are so many options out there.
It's true. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. The best way to go about it is to think about your specific needs and choose a combination of methods that work for you.
Okay, let's break it down by category. Starting with cloud backup services. What are some of the key things to consider when choosing a cloud provider?
Security is the most important. You want a provider with strong encryption, multi-factor authentication, and a good track record of protecting customer data. It's also important to think about storage space and cost, backup frequency, and how easy it is to use.
Right, it needs to be user-friendly. What are some popular cloud backup services out there?
Backblaze, Carbonite, and iDrive are all pretty reputable. They have good track records. They offer different plans too, so you can find one that fits your needs and budget.
Okay, so cloud backup is one option. What about those trusty external hard drives? What are their pros and cons?
They're relatively inexpensive. They offer a lot of storage space, and
Yeah.
you have direct control over your data. You can easily transport them or store them off-site, but they can be damaged or stolen, and you have to do the backups manually.
So they're great for an offsite copy, but maybe not ideal as your only backup. What if you have tons of data, like terabytes worth of photos and videos?
For huge amounts of data, a NAS device might be a better choice. That stands for Network Attached Storage. It's basically like a personal cloud, a dedicated storage device that's connected to your home or office network.
So like your own personal data center.
Exactly. They can offer terabytes or even petabytes of storage, and they often come with features like RAID configurations, which provide redundancy, and protect your data even if one of the drives fails.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Sounds like a good option for professionals or serious data hoarders. But those are expensive, right?
They can be, but there are also affordable NAS solutions for home users. It all just depends on your needs and budget.
Okay, so we've covered cloud backup, external hard drives, and NAS devices. What about tape backups? Aren't those kind of outdated?
Well, they might seem old school, but tape backups are far from obsolete. They're incredibly durable, they have a long shelf life, and they're offline by nature, which makes them perfect for an air-gapped copy.
Right. Because who's going to hack a tape? That's like something out of a spy movie.
Exactly. They're not as convenient for everyday backups, but they're great for long-term archiving and disaster recovery.
So it's not about choosing one solution. It's about finding a combination that works for you.
Exactly. You could use a cloud service for your everyday backups, an external hard drive for an offsite copy, maybe a NAS for large media files, and maybe even a tape backup for archiving.
Right. So it's all about creating this layered approach to data protection. Speaking of layers, didn't you mention some advanced backup techniques earlier?
I did. We talked about air gapping and RAID configurations, but there are other techniques like incremental and differential backups and data deduplication.
Okay, tell me more about those. What are incremental and differential backups?
Imagine you're working on this big file. Instead of copying the whole file every time you make a change, incremental backups only back up the changes made since the last backup. This saves time and storage space and bandwidth. Differential backups are similar, but they back up all the changes made since the last full backup.
So it's like being more efficient with your backups. What about data deduplication?
Data deduplication is like magic for saving space. It finds and gets rid of duplicate chunks of data in your backups and stores only one unique copy. This can really reduce the amount of storage space you need.
That's awesome. Okay, so we've talked about all these backup solutions and some advanced techniques, but what happens if, even with all this, we still lose data? Is it all over?
Not necessarily. That's where data recovery comes in, but we'll dive into that in the last part of our deep dive.
All right, we're back for the final part of our data backup deep dive. We've covered the 3-2-1-1-0 rule and how to choose the right backup solutions. But even with the best plans, sometimes things just, go wrong.
That's right. Hard drives fail, accidents happen, and sometimes, despite our best efforts, we lose data. That's why a data recovery plan is just as important as a solid backup strategy.
Okay, so let's talk data recovery. What are some of the most common ways people lose data?
Well, hardware failures are a big one. Hard drives have a limited lifespan, and they can crash without any warning. Accidental deletion is another common one. I think we've all been there. You get distracted, you misclick, and suddenly, poof, important files are gone.
Yep, been there. And then, of course, there are cyberattacks.
Absolutely. Ransomware, malware, phishing scams, all of those can lead to data loss, corruption, or theft. And we can't forget about natural disasters either. Fires, floods, earthquakes. Those can really damage physical storage and data centers.
Wow, so many ways to lose data. What are our options if this happens to us?
First, you need to figure out what happened. What kind of data loss is it? Is it because of hardware failure, accidental deletion, or something else? The way you try to recover the data depends on what caused it and how bad it is.
Well, where do we even start? Are there any, DIY data recovery tricks we can try?
For simple stuff, like if you accidentally deleted a file, you can try data recovery software. These programs scan your hard drive for those deleted files and try to get them back. But it's super important to stop using the device right away so you don't overwrite the deleted data.
So the faster you act, the better your chances. What if it's a hardware failure, like a hard drive crash?
That's more complicated. Trying to recover data from a physically damaged hard drive is risky. You could make the damage worse.
Right.
In those cases, you really need a professional data recovery service.
What do they do exactly?
They have special tools and expertise for all sorts of data loss scenarios. They can work with damaged hard drives, corrupted files. They can even try to recover data from formatted devices. It's like having a digital detective on your side.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I bet they're expensive.
They can be, yeah. It depends on how complicated the recovery is and how much data is involved. That's why it's always better to prevent data loss in the first place with regular backups.
Makes sense. Prevention is cheaper than a cure. Okay, well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. Any final thoughts? Key takeaways for our listeners?
Absolutely. Remember that data loss is a real threat, and it can happen to anyone. Don't wait until you lose something important to start thinking about backups.
Yeah.
The 3-2-1-1-0 rule is a great way to build a really strong backup plan.
It is.
Make sure to diversify your backups, use different media and locations, have an off-site copy and an air-gapped backup, and test those backups often to make sure they're actually working.
Right.
And if you do lose data, don't panic. There are ways to recover it. From DIY software to those professional services we talked about,
That's good to know.
your data is valuable. Protecting it should be a priority.
Well, we hope this deep dive has given you the tools to take control of your data and keep those digital treasures safe.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll see you next time.
Until then, stay safe out there.